Hello people! Today we have a talk about one good man who have left his trace in the world of rock music. And he didn't make music.
This is not a musician, Carl Sagan, one of the pioneers in the literary genre of popularizing science. The list of areas of his activity is considerable, from NASA spacecrafts to serials. There was a time when I knew nothing about him, and I found references to him in the works of the famous popularizer of science and astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson.
And now, finally, one of his books is now in my hands. This is The Demon-Haunted World, Ukrainian edition.
As a man who has done much to attract interest in space and science, Sagan certainly influenced and inspired some musicians, although he himself had almost nothing to do with music. I want to start with the fact that you can find a lot of musical compositions that are simply called like Carl Sagan or Sagan, but they may not be about the famous scientist, and that's a fact. However, there are a lot of much more famous people whose names are not used in song titles. So, we can assume that the popularizer of science still inspired these people. Let's start the review of the most interesting compositions. Links to most of the songs I mention here can be found in the description to the video.
Information about some musicians who have linked their music projects with a scientist can be found on Wikipedia, for example.
Beginning in 2009, a musical project known as Symphony of Science sampled several excerpts of Sagan from his series Cosmos and remixed them to electronic music. But that's not rock, although the series Cosmos, of course, is incredible in itself and worthy of attention. From what I managed to find by myself, here is this soft song about Sagan, singing by Justin Madden. There is even an entire album of his songs called the Piano Rock Album. I could not find more information about the author. The only Justin Madden to be found is a politician and former Australian footballer, but it is unknown whether the author of this song and he is one person or not. The American indie rock band from Minneapolis, Night Moves, has a very cool song called Carl Sagan.
I love very heavy music, but get a buzz with this song.
Easy pop rock in which you can find a link to Carl Sagan is the band N.I. Lights. In 2003, Loch Lomond, a band playing indie with pop and folk rock, was formed in Portland, USA. In 2007, they released their third album called Paper the Walls, the title song of which is dedicated to Carl Sagan. From pop rock bands, songs about Sagan also have bands and musical projects Winton Vegan, Lesser Strays, and The Hook. Next, there is something musical that is difficult for me to relate to any of the genres, and information about this band is extremely small. All that is known is that they are from the United Kingdom, and this track was recorded in 2016. The name of the band is Pagan, if I understood correctly.
It definitely has nothing to do with an Australian band called Pagan.
We go further to the heavier, from pop rock to rock. Indie rock guitarist Matt Hollywood and the Bad Feelings have an album of 2018, where the first track is a song with the name of the famous scientist. They create in Los Angeles, California, and not only their song about Sagan, but also others are professional and cool. In 2016, the band Dharma Kings from Austin, Texas, dedicated a hard rock song with a dark grunge element to the scientist. Rock compositions can be found from all over the world. The odds to the scientist is, for example, Spanish language rock from such artists as Gaspar Baquet or the Argentine band Los Aulidos. Good songs from the bands Little Viking and The Biographer. The latter is very similar to Britpop.
Let's move on to the more heavy.
Rock. Indie rock from the shores of the Great Lakes. The band, The Formal Age, has a song that is almost entirely instrumental except for a small part where you can hear Sagan. Her name is Carl Sagan's Last Ride. From the rock band Band of Anyone, I found pure instrumental, and I also found a pretty cool track about a scientist from the band Bleeding Rita.
I couldn't find any information about band Bleeding Rita.
There is another band that will appeal to fans of post-grunge from Sweden, Plan 3. On their album Wish I Was Stormborn 2017 there is a song Carl Sagan, a nice track. Robo Dojo from Omaha and the band with the original name Motherfucker also have a good rock tributes. The song of the second one is called Carl Sagan's Ghost.
We moving to metal and even things heavier than metal. Heavy, alternative, stoner.
In Austin, Texas, there is a metal band with an interesting name, Carl Sagan's Skate Shoes, and their 2016 album of the same name is quite high quality, although I can't say whether Carl Sagan himself ever wore such shoes. Los Natas is a band from Argentina that existed from 1994 to 2012 and played stoner and psychedelic. I already mentioned a band from Argentina that dedicated a song to Sagan about Los Aulidos. Los Natas will be more interesting for fans of heavy, and the song about the scientist is included in the album Ciudad de Brahman in 1999. Sagan was involved in several space missions, several of which were Martian. The Viking spacecraft was the first to make a soft landing and fully work out its scientific program. Here is a famous photo of the scientist and a copy of this spacecraft in Death Valley.
He could tell a lot about Mars.
So, there is a volcanic plateau on Mars called Tarsis. But there is also a band with that name from Birmingham, Alabama. And in 2019, they released an album with a track dedicated to Sagan. And the work is cool. In general, there are several bands called Tarsis who play heavy music, for example, from Brazil.
I also found a young punk band called Get Busy Dying.
They are from Oklahoma, and one of their first recorded songs is called Super Saiyan Carl Sagan. I also found a record of the band founded in 2006 in Brisbane, Australia, Cry Havoc. The 2011 recording and song is called Carl Sagan.
Another famous book that I now hold in my hands is Pale Blue Dot.
A book that was first released in 1994 and became a bestseller.
This is the Ukrainian edition in my hands.
The book borrowed its name from a famous photograph. Pale Blue Dot is a photograph of planet Earth taken on February 14, 1990 by the Voyager 1 space probe from a record distance of about 6 billion kilometers. The name of this photo was given by Carl Sagan, and later a book with a similar title was published. It is about the vision of humanity in our solar system and its study, about the movement of humanity into space. And in itself, this book, photo and idea also inspired many artists. You can meet Pale Blue Dot in the movies, for example, or other arts. The 2014 Swedish science fiction short film Wanderers uses excerpts of Sagan's narration of his book Pale Blue Dot, laid over digitally created visuals of humanity's possible future expansion into outer space.
Can also be found in music. I'll start from soft to harder.
In September 2008, a musical composer, Ben Jordan, released his album Pale Blue Dot as a tribute to Carl Sagan's life. It's just music that looks like ambient to me. A couple more examples of electronic music: TVRP and Big Wild. Both have a track called Pale Blue Dot. Check it out if it is interesting for you. And now rock. 2014 released a music video and song Pale Blue Dot from a band from Miami, Florida, Sound of Contact. The musicians themselves, in the description of the track, note that they were more inspired to create by another book about space, namely The Home Planet. The Hungarian musician Gilbert Bodos has a track that ranges from light and calm to heavy and rock sound. The name of the track is Pale Blue Dot, and in it you can hear Carl Sagan himself, or rather part of his monologue about our planet.
Now, one of the most famous bands in the genre of progressive metal.
Dream Theater, released in 2019, their next studio album called Distance Over Time, and the final track is called the same as that photo and book, Pale Blue Dot. If you look at the lyrics, you can see that it is very similar to the monologue of Carl Sagan, only more adapted to sing it and not read. There is also the album Pale Blue Dot from the alternative rock band Dream Shade.
This is a band from Switzerland, founded in 2006.
And finally, of course, the most epic work to date is dedicated to a famous scientist from the world of heavy music, Nightwish. In February 2015, the Finnish-based symphonic metal band Nightwish released the song Sagan as a non-album bonus track for their single Elan. Every phrase in the song is very accurate. For example, there are the words "sending all the poets to the stars."
This is not just a good saying.
This is a hint at one of his most interesting works, the golden records for spacecraft that were to leave our solar system, just in case, in the event that someday Voyager spacecraft will be found by other space civilizations. Sagan was the developer of these messages, and in addition to photographs of people, sounds of nature on them, in the infinity of space was sent the music of the earth. Johann Sebastian Bach, Mozart, Chuck Berry and Louis Armstrong. That's what the phrase "sending all the poets to the stars" means. So I highly recommend listening to this track, as well as all other tracks, to form your own opinion. From Nightwish is Not Everything, a short monologue, Pale Blue Dot by Carl Sagan, can be heard in the track Ad Astra from the album Human to Nature.
This album was released in 2020.
Let me remind you that the links to most of the musical works I talked about in this episode can be found in the description.
And finally, read books and goodbye, rockers!